There he goes. That's on. Thank y'all all for coming. Appreciate you. Today's meeting is of the Joint Legislative Committee on Compilation, Revision, and Publication. Today is August the 8th, 2023. And we start with correction of code errors. Right?
Yes, sir. In your handout, I have a Word document that says Mississippi Code Errors. You look at that. I think traditionally what we do is y'all look over them and ask questions, but I'll give you just a little bit of background here. The authority, the statutory authority for the committee to correct code errors is in section 1-1-109 of the Mississippi Code. And it says, in preparing the acts of the legislature for publication in the Mississippi Code of 1972, after the adjournment of each session, without altering the sense, meaning, or effects of the acts, the joint committee is authorized to. And it lists several things, correct the spelling of words, but the key one is correct manifest typographical and grammatical errors. And what we've done over the years, y'all that have been here before, you've seen the type errors, and you can look at really page 1 and get some examples of what we're talking about. The words mental health were transposed in the first one. The name of the agency didn't have the word "the" in it. The word "the" was put in front of the dollar amount, the $84 a day. The next one was a little different. There was a reference to bail in the rules of civil procedure, and there's no bail in that. It's meant to be criminal procedure. This happens a lot. At the end of page 1, ensure, the wrong word is used to mean make sure something is done, but it looks like an insurance company. I won't go through all of them, but I did want to point out a couple of them that are a little different. Look on page 3. It's not really different, but that 41.961 and 41.10.3 are what happened is a new article was created in that chapter, and so the existing sections that are there now needed to be changed. Oh, I'm sorry, that was not the one I was talking about. That's on the page 5. I'm sorry. Look at page 5. If you look at 57.89.1, 57.123.1, and at the bottom 73.24.1. New articles were created in the code, and so the existing code sections now say this chapter, and now it needs to say this article. So those are just internal references. If you look at the bottom of page 4, we keep Mississippi State Crime Lab. It's been changed to Forensics Lab, so that was corrected. Right above that, Office of Youth Services, it's Division of Youth Services, so that's just changing the reference to it. The name of an agency. Look at page 6 and 7. This is a little different. We have occasionally, you see bills that say that this code section shall be codified as a certain number. And it's a thought of the drafter, and maybe somebody from outside the legislature that submitted a draft. And Ethan and I, as co-counsel, looked over those, several of them. It's the ones that start at the bottom of page 6, where it's not a, House Bill 1125, Senate Bill 2487, and then the two bills on page 7. And so we just, looking at it, it just seemed to be wrong where they were codified. And so we are asking the committee to change the place that would be codified from where it was designated in the bill. That is, if y'all have any questions about any individual ones, I have the actual copies here. I can answer it in a lot more detail. Oh, I did want to mention too, I'm sorry. We printed this on Friday and we found 2 more errors, and I have it on a sheet. If anybody wants to see it, they're minor. As far as their subsection number needs to be changed, and some punctuation and a conjunction added. But anybody that wants that, we can let you see that. But typically, I do want to mention this. I know that y'all can't look at these and don't want to look at all of them individually. What we do, we look at them and determine manifest error. That's the authority of the committee. And over the years, we've kind of developed a procedure or analysis, I guess, where pretty much has to be obvious that there's an error. That doesn't mean you can't look up something like a code section reference. You can look it up and see, but basically by looking at it very easily or looking at a cross-reference or something, you can tell that something's wrong with it. And the second part is we also have to know what it needs to be changed to. We get times when people come in and say, oh, we didn't intend for that to be this, it should be this and that. And you can't tell that from looking at it. So we take a very conservative approach, and unless we're absolutely sure that it needs to be changed, we don't put it on this list. And so if it does need to be changed, then that'll be done in a bill by the legislature at a later session. So that's the standards that we're using in analyzing it. And Mr. Chairman, what we typically have done, if you recall, is we just give them 5 minutes, 3 minutes, and if they have any questions about any individual ones.
Let me address those first. The first ones are the Mississippi Code errors, and that is page 1 through, Ronnie has gone all through page 7. And these look perfunctory to me, but are there any questions about 1 through 7 where it changes criminal or of insure was misspelled, Belf was in the wrong line? I mean, you can go through those, but then compact, a couple of code sections, division, section, forensics instead of state crime lab. I mean, if you look through Article 2 and a few code sections, I don't see any, but I will entertain any questions on Mississippi Code errors. Seeing none, we'll entertain a motion to adopt. So move. Thank you, Tommy. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The code errors are approved as amended. So now we'll go to the multiple amendments to the same code section.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next thing is the booklet that's stapled. This handout has the authority for the code committee to merge multiple code sections that have been amended by the same bill where the amendment was not the same amendment. So the first thing we're going to do is just talk a little bit about the authority. We've got section 1379. Everybody's familiar with the date that it's approved by the governor's signature and the effective date. That's what controls without the authority of the code committee. But the authority of the code committee in section 1109L is to integrate amendments that have been made in more than one act of the legislature in a single session to the same code section or provision of law, so that all versions of the same code section can that were enacted during a single session may become effective. And that's if effectuating such amendments is consistent with the intent of the legislature. So that's the first thing Ronnie and I look at is, was there language that the legislature gave that we call controlling language? So if a bill says that it is as amended by another bill earlier in the session, it intends to control over that other bill. So that's the first part of that analysis. The second part of the analysis that we look to is if there is no controlling language, are the amendments standalone? And if you look at the middle of page 1 of that packet, you can see how the code committee decided that it would not integrate multiple amendments unless the amendments were standalone. They didn't want to get into the situation of actually rewriting the bill. So if any of the language overlaps and conflicts, we won't integrate. So we only integrate amendments that are standalone so that we're only ratifying the intent of the legislature. It would mean, otherwise it would mean that the committee would virtually be rewriting the law instead of the legislature. And then on later, about 4 years later, in September 18th, 2000, the minutes of the joint committee said that the committee will integrate the multiple amendments. So just as a matter of course, and I'm going to read that provision because it's important. The committee will, as a matter of course, integrate the language of both bills if A, the amendments are standalone amendments that do not conflict with or overlap each other, and B, there is no express legislative intent in the bills that indicates that the language should not be integrated. So, and then otherwise, if there is no controlling language and the amendments are not standalone, then we'll go to that analysis in section 1379. where you look at the effective date of the bill, the date of the signature, and then even down to the time of the signature. So on page 3 of your handout, you've got a code, a list of code sections. We have 23 code sections this year that were amended by multiple bills. Some of them have had multiple bills, more than 2, and all of them had at least 2. There are 23 code sections. 13 of those had controlling language. 2 of those bills had the same language, so you don't have to worry about integrating them. One of them, 2 of them were the effective date and the governor's signature, but they were just reenacted. So the 5 that we are interested in is on the second page, page 4, second page of that list, page 4. And those are the 5 that we're going to be integrating. Section 4315, 201 through 207, that's the baby safe haven law. And House Bill 1149 was a technical amendment to split CPS out of VHS. And there was without integrating today, the provisions of 1318, which was the baby safe haven law, would not be in law because House Bill 1149 controlled. And then section 571601 on the middle of page 4 there is also another one that we're going to merge. And that is just a technical provision in the Mississippi Main Street Loan Program. But some language would have been lost there. And then 7733 deals with public utilities. So the next few pages in the handout, the rest of the handout from pages 5 through 21 are the different code sections, and the language that would have been lost is highlighted in yellow. So starting on page 5, section 4315-201 is a provision of the baby drop-off law, and all of the yellow text on pages 5 through 7 would have been lost. And then on line 72, you see the change that 1149 made that's not highlighted. So today, when we integrate, we will make sure that the yellow language goes in the code as well. The same thing for page 8 and page 9. I'm going to give you a second to look at that and if you have any questions. And the baby drop-off law, that's one of the pieces of the path to permanency legislation that kind of came as a group legislation this year out of the judiciary committees. And then starting on page 10 and going through, well, really the language we're interested in is on page 11. That's section 571601, and that's the Mississippi Main Street. And that language there tethers the reimbursable expenses that MDA can use to money provided by the legislature. So that highlighted language would be lost without integration.
Hold on just a second.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to give everybody a chance to just read along. You're busting through there. The baby protection was very well debated heavily by the Senate and the House, and I want to make sure that everybody reads that part. It's about the baby drop-off laws, as y'all can see, and also certain information that have to be disclosed or not disclosed. So I'd like everybody to read that for just a second, and before we jump past it. And that goes through to 207, as I understand it. This is a baby safety device. Does that relate back to baby drop-off?
Yes, it's all in the same article.
Surrenders, needs action, or leaving. I mean, all of this was discussed, at least in the Senate when I was watching it, was discussed heavily. Then on page 11, where you're saying provided the legislature, what does that mean? What are you changing there for the monies? The
bill there, that was a provision that was in House Bill 1089. And it limited the amount of reimbursable monies in the fund to just those that are provided by the legislature.
Which funds would be provided if it wasn't a legislature?
A lot of times there are bond monies, and then also private monies can be placed in certain funds as well.
So this applies to the Mississippi Development Authority?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then it says, if I'm reading this right on 11 to make sure that we understand everything, the monies in the fund which are derived from the proceeds of general obligation bonds or provided by the legislature. So that means the legislature would have voted to put this money in here?
Yes, sir. The appropriation process.
Okay, so we would have appropriated, the legislature would have appropriated it, And then they allow for reimbursement of necessary cost up to 3% of the proceeds of the bonds, or the monies provided by the legislature. What does that mean? 3% of the proceeds, or what is that?
3% of the proceeds. This, I think this code section was first instituted when we had the bond bill, and now the money is straight through appropriations, so straight money without the issuance of bonds. So it was necessary to make sure that that was tied in there to the.
You're saying here then that the money that is appropriated by the legislature would be in addition to 3%.
It won't exceed 3% of those monies, whether they be bond money or appropriated money.
So you're reading that, and I was reading it before it was 3% or the monies provided by the legislature. Is that not right?
I think it's either, it's going to be the money from the bond proceeds or the.
Or the money provided by the legislature. They can spend either one, so it
Yes,
could be
sir.
over 3%. It would be, it'd just be whatever the money's for the legislature.
Right.
Okay.
That's
I
correct.
just want to make sure before we zip along here, there's only a couple of those, make sure everybody's had a chance to understand what you're proposing here. Are there, the only other changes on 21?
The only other change, yes, sir, is on 21, and that's to code section 7733. And really, what this is just ratifying the intent of the legislature in the two bills. Let me go back and get those numbers. So House Bill 1060 and Senate Bill 2433. So Senate Bill 2433 is the highlighted language on page 21. And because of the way that the statute section 1379 plays out, the House bill would actually control and wipe out Senate Bill 2433's language. So the vote today would be integrate that language.
Well, we only have one city over 100,000 occupants. So this is about the city of Jackson.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and so what does this do?
It defines the term eligible municipality and eligible homeowners association within the public utilities chapter. And specifically, it's Article 1 of the certification of public convenience and necessity. So it's just basically an amendment to the definitions of that chapter.
So it says that this definition would only apply to Jackson. So everybody,
Yes, sir.
and we have one Jackson representative in here. The eligible homeowners association. What does that have to do? These are definitions that go back to somewhere else.
Yes, so their definitions for the entire article.
And what does the article do so that the committee may know?
The article is for a utility that gets a certification of public convenience and necessity, so it's licensing of public utilities.
So it's licensing. Does this change the license of Jackson?
No.
Okay. I'm just asking. I want to make sure before we do something. So Jackson.
And it's other, Ronnie was saying it was other sections in the bill that where they can maintain their own water system. This homeowners association.
I got you. Okay.
Yes.
All right, I remember that. There were a different homeowners association that wanted to run its own water.
That's right.
This would allow them to do so.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Well, I remember that part. Any questions on the authority of the Joint Committee to integrate these amendments into single code? Yes, sir. Representative? One moment, please. What page, sir? Yeah, so everybody can hear you. There's tape recorded somewhere. Yeah, there you go.
On page 21 on line 451, says is adjacent to which a groundwater well system originally designed. Is that word which necessary? Is adjacent to which a groundwater well system originally designed to supply the subdivision, which continues to provide drinking water to private user is located.
I think you copied the statute, right? So,
This was the language in the bill.
yeah, so we might not have been as artful, Representative Yancey, in drafting the legislation, but I don't think we can change words, right?
No, just with the authority is only to integrate the language that was there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We just need to pay closer attention when we draft it. Other questions? Other questions by any member of the committee? Senator Sparks, anyone? Okay, then we're ready for a motion, please, sir.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'd ask that any motions made to integrate, that it would be retroactive to the effective dates of each of the respective bills that we're integrating, so that it goes back to the July 1st.
We have such a motion. Senator, thank you. Secretary, so moved. All second, thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Thank you. Appreciate your work on that.
Yes, sir.
And then LexisNexis. Anders. It says here you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you for coming out on election day. I wish everybody well in your races. As you know, the contract gives us the opportunity to ask for a price increase every year. You will have in your package a letter that sets out our proposal for this year's products. It represents an increase of about 4% overall across the different publications. Bear in mind that we have found ourselves in a situation that's been unusual in terms of the cost pressures. Our costs, based on the producer price index, has gone up roughly 10% year over year. The good news is that just as with the consumer prices, even producer prices are coming down as well. So we expect to get back to more normal situations next year. Knock on wood to that, I think we all feel. So you see my proposal in front of you. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
One moment, let's see. First, can I ask one question? Have you asked for raises in prior years?
Yes.
So every year you've asked for a raise? Yeah, that's what I recall as well. I don't see any substantiation for a 4% raise here. So I'd ask any questions of the committee. Everyone have the proposed language before them?
The language of the proposal is the letter from LexisNexis in the packet. And I think the chairman's asked me to read that LexisNexis is proposing an increase of about 4% on average across the various publications. They're mindful of the difficult economic situations facing states due to the lingering pandemic, such as supply chain and commodity issues, as well as persistent inflationary pressures. While larger than in recent years, it is important to note that the requested increase is considerably below the increase in the producer price index for our industry. Oh, and I think Anders also mentioned the PPI, the producer price index. Historically, the PPI has on average grown by 3 to 5% per year, but has for the last 4 consecutive years grown on average by 9% increase. And he mentioned the increase in paper and transport.
Yeah, the actual pandemic was several years ago, hopefully never to be returned. But each year you've asked for an increase. And so what has the total increase been in the last 4 years?
I would say going back, I think last year or the year before, we didn't ask for any increase because it was a particularly challenging year. Usually it's around 2 to 3%, which is typically what the underlying cost inflation is.
And so how did you arrive at 4%?
Well, we tried to keep it down. I mean, it's efficiencies. I mean, we also want to do our part to not drive up the prices because it's not in our best interest to make the product too expensive. So, but at the same time, to make it sustainable, we do need to increase the prices. Salaries go up, transportation costs have gone up incredibly, and that's going to get much worse now with the bankruptcy of the largest trucker in America. So it's the realities. I mean, the publishing industry is a very difficult space to be in nowadays. You have printers closing, you have paper mills closing, And there's just fewer facilities to go around and fewer products.
Okay. Questions from the committee? Senator Sparks, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess if everything's revolved around printing and ink and binding, have we ever quoted online access to the product?
Could you repeat that?
Have you quoted online access? It sounds like the increase in cost to a great degree is printing and ink and paper, and you just mentioned paper mills closing. Has the state ever requested, or have they ever been provided online access for potentially the people that are making a purchase?
So we do provide that as part of the contract. There's a website, a public access website of the Mississippi Code, but the reality is that a lot of attorneys still use the books, so there is a need for both. And in addition to the print and the printing and binding, we also incur significant costs for editors that do a lot of the work to actually process the acts, create the code. So we have several editorial staff that work on this for a very big part of the year. So it's a big salary cost as well.
I think in the future, maybe if the primary driver of cost is as much as I enjoy looking at the code in a bookshelf, maybe we need to look at that option for at least some of the public service people that are going to use this product, is that they use an online product or give them that option. Might be more helpful. Thank you.
When we did that at the Secretary of State's office, we cut it in about half, the number of people that wanted it, and it was just sitting somewhere with dust on it, and courthouses all over and sheriff's offices all over. So we ended up cutting it in half, and at this particular point in time, I can't find any young lawyers that read the books anymore. Everything is online, and if it's not there, it's there now if it wasn't there before, and it will will increase as we go forward. Yes, sir. Representative, you're recognized.
What is how much is the state spend in total for this? So how much is the increase? How much is the 4% increase?
Okay, one moment, please.
Each year, the legislature appropriates money for the committee purchases, and I believe it's 400,000 per year. But let me point, you asked how much increase. The 400 has been in effect for probably 6-8 years. I'm not sure. And there's enough in there that we can absorb the cost increase without going over the 400,000. I think it's only, Code Committee was created in 1996 and the appropriation is 300,000. It's gone up once or twice over all that period of time to 400,000. So I don't anticipate that this would cause an increase in the appropriation. I don't think we're up. Maria, do you know, we're not up against the total amount of the appropriation yet, are we? No. We're still under it, yeah. So the increase of 4% will not cause the state to spend any more out of the authorized amount.
Thank you, Representative. Anyone else? Okay, Senator Sparks.
I would have a motion that we approve the changes, but not the cost increase at this time. I would like to see a breakdown. I think even as Representative Newman had mentioned, how many are there? Where do they go? Are we doing this for every municipality, every county? You know, what is kind of the bulk of that? Because even though we haven't bumped maybe the $400,000 appropriation, 4% is 4%, and the money would have been returned back to the state if unutilized from the appropriation. So I think we need to sort of look at that a little bit.
Okay, I'll take that as a motion to set this aside until such time as we have other information, at which time I'll call the committee back together once we have further information to answer the questions represented by the representative and the senator. So a motion is to set aside this issue until a later called committee meeting.
And Mr. Chairman, may I clarify the motion?
Yes, sir.
With the changes that Lexus needs to make for printing, we can go ahead and approve those.
Which one, have you got those, sir?
In the first page of the letter, they're just saying to replace certain volumes. It's just a publication issue for the code coming up.
Okay. With that amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and when we get more information, as chair, I'll call the committee back and we can address the last issue. Okay, anything else, Ethan, Ronnie? Okay, we'll entertain a motion for. I started to say rise and report, but there's nobody upstairs. Adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Thank you all for taking time on this valuable day.